He had everything: wealth, power, privacy. But when a billionaire's credit card is mysteriously declined at a crowded mall, humiliation threatens to expose him, until a 5-year-old girl steps forward and says, "I want to pay for him." What begins as a random act of kindness unravels a story of betrayal, healing, and unexpected love, where the richest man in the room learns that the true measure of wealth isn't in his bank account, but in the hearts of those who see him without it. Elijah Carter stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse suite, his reflection caught somewhere between the early morning sun and the ghost of a man he barely recognized anymore. He was the founder of a global tech empire, the kind of billionaire whose name only appeared in legal documents, quiet boardrooms, and anonymous philanthropic endowments. Never on gossip blogs. Never on social media. This morning, though, something inside him stirred, a vague craving for normalcy, maybe even anonymity. He hadn't stepped into a public grocery store in over a decade. His assistants typically ordered everything in bulk. His staff stocked his pantries and monitored expiration dates with the precision of surgeons. But today, he wanted to be unseen. He changed into simple clothes, a plain gray t-shirt, dark jeans, and sneakers so worn they could have belonged to anyone. No watch, no phone in hand, no wallet fat with black cards and platinum IDs. Just one slim card in his pocket, the one he'd used for years without issue. He stepped into his private elevator, descending from the sky-high luxury of his home into a world where no one would know him. His driver was surprised when Elijah insisted on going alone. "Sir, the mall is crowded this time of day." "That's the point," Elijah interrupted, sliding on a pair of sunglasses. "I'll call you when I'm done." The car, a modest rented sedan for once, purred away from the curb, merging into city traffic. Elijah kept the windows down, letting the humid summer air tangle his thoughts. Billboards passed. Children laughed in the park. Horns honked. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt like part of the real world. The mall came into view, a sprawling structure of glass and marble, teeming with families, teenagers, tourists, and locals alike. Elijah walked through its automatic doors without hesitation. No one glanced his way. No whispered recognition. No flashing cameras. Inside, he wandered a bit, stopping at a bookstore to browse the shelves, letting the scent of fresh pages ground him. He picked up a children's book on impulse, smiling to himself. Zoe, the girl's name on the cover read. He thought nothing of it. Eventually, he entered the grocery section of the upscale department store. It was clean, modern, and filled with everything from imported teas to exotic fruits. Elijah took his time, examining labels, comparing brands. It felt good to not be in a rush. He placed several items into a basket: a bottle of rare olive oil, a small package of truffle pasta, strawberries, almonds, oat milk. It wasn't a feast, just enough to feel like he had chosen something real for himself. The checkout line was short. A young cashier with bold red lipstick and tired eyes motioned him forward. She didn't smile. "Good afternoon," Elijah said as he placed the items on the conveyor belt. The cashier barely looked up. "Card, please." Elijah reached into his back pocket, pulling out the slim, black metal card. He handed it over with the quiet confidence of someone who had never had a transaction declined in his life. She inserted it into the machine. A pause. Then a beep. She muttered, pulling it out and reinserting it. Another beep. Declined. Elijah raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Try it again." She rolled her eyes and did. Declined. Now heads were turning. A mother with a toddler in her cart glanced over. 2 teenage boys behind him started snickering. The cashier let out a dry laugh, finally looking Elijah in the eye. "You must be a proud broke person." Her words hit with the weight of a slap. Not because they hurt, but because of the absurdity of it all. If only she knew. Elijah opened his mouth to explain, to protest. But something stopped him. He felt suddenly hollow, like he was watching the scene from a distance. The card, it had never failed. Not once. He hadn't changed his accounts. He hadn't lost it. So what the hell was going on? Before he could figure it out, A soft voice behind him cut through the tension. I want to pay for him. He turned, stunned. There, standing barely waist-high, was a little girl holding out a colorful card. And in that instant, Elijah Carter, the billionaire, the loner, the man no one recognized, found his carefully managed life shifting in the most unexpected way. For a moment, time stood still. Elijah Carter blinked, his eyes locking onto the small hand clutching a debit card decorated with glittery cartoon kittens. The girl holding it couldn't have been older than 5. She looked up at him with wide, serious eyes framed by soft curls and the kind of innocence that didn't yet understand the world's cruelty, or maybe somehow understood it better than most. I want to pay for him, she said again, her voice louder this time, with a quiet kind of conviction that cut through the tension in the air like sunlight through fog. The cashier's smirk faltered. What? She asked, half laughing, uncertain now. The little girl didn't waver. She pushed the card toward the counter. He looked sad. A few shoppers, previously smirking or whispering behind their hands, were now openly watching, unsure if this was some strange social experiment or a joke being played on them. Elijah didn't move. He looked down at the girl, something like disbelief softening the stern lines of his face. Behind her, a woman came rushing forward, her heels clicking quickly on the polished floor. She was tall, graceful even in a rush, with hair tied into a low bun and a concern that etched her features deeply. Zoe, she said gently but firmly, kneeling beside the girl. What are you doing, sweetheart? The little girl, Zoe, turned to her mother with calm certainty. He needs help. He looks like no one helps him. Her mother glanced up at Elijah, and their eyes met. For a second, something passed between them. Recognition not of faces, but of the kind of weariness that's hard to hide. Her expression softened. She stood. I'm sorry, she said quickly, her voice cultured, controlled. She has a strong sense of justice, I suppose. Elijah managed a faint smile. She's braver than most adults I know. The cashier, looking more awkward by the second, folded her arms. So, what, are we doing this or not? The woman hesitated. Elijah stepped forward. No, really, this isn't necessary. I'll figure it out. But the mother, now with a strange glint of amusement in her eyes, looked at her daughter. You want to help him that much? Zoe nodded solemnly. With a sigh and a soft smile, the woman turned back to the cashier. Fine. She's allowed. Go ahead and run it. The cashier looked between them, clearly unsure if she was being pranked on camera, then reluctantly took the child's card and ran it through the reader. Approved. A beep confirmed the transaction. A receipt printed. The tension snapped like a frayed wire. The snickering boys behind Elijah were suddenly quiet. A woman in line whispered, Did that really just happen? And the cashier? She was staring at the receipt like it had insulted her personally. Elijah picked up the bag of groceries in silence. He looked down at Zoe again. Thank you, he said, every syllable genuine. You're welcome, she said sweetly, then whispered, Don't be sad. Her mother was already leading her away, and Elijah didn't stop them. Not yet. He lingered, standing still amid the hushed murmurs and confused expressions of the customers around him. The billionaire who'd been accused of being a proud broke person had just been rescued by a 5-year-old girl with a cartoon card. It wasn't the money that shook him. It was how it felt being helped. He took a deep breath, walked slowly toward the mall exit, and leaned against the wall just outside the automatic doors. The bag in his hand was heavier now, not with groceries, but with emotion. He waited, eyes scanning the exit, not sure what he would say next, but knowing he had to say something. This wasn't over. Not yet. Elijah Carter stood just outside the mall's main entrance, the automatic doors sliding open and closed behind him, brushing the back of his jacket with each whoosh. He leaned against the glass wall, eyes scanning every passerby. He wasn't even sure what he was waiting for. An explanation? A second chance to thank them properly? A way to return a favor that had been so effortlessly and innocently given? Minutes passed. A cluster of teenagers exited laughing loudly. A young couple argued quietly as they passed. Then he saw them, mother and daughter, walking leisurely, hand in hand, the little girl skipping a little every few steps as though the day had unfolded just as she'd imagined it would. Elijah straightened, hesitated, then began walking toward them. "Excuse me," he said, stopping a respectful distance from the pair. The woman turned first. She looked almost surprised to see him again. "Oh," she said, slowing to a stop. "You waited." Zoe looked up and beamed. "Hi, mister. You got your food." He knelt slightly, so he was eye level with her. "I did. Thanks to you." Zoe giggled and leaned against her mother's leg. Elijah turned his attention to the woman. I didn't want to let that moment pass without saying thank you properly," he said, his voice low and sincere. "Not just for the payment, for the grace." She gave a small nod. "You're welcome. We're not in the habit of doing that sort of thing, if that's what you're wondering." "I wouldn't expect you to be," he said with a small smile. "I'm Elijah." She hesitated a beat, then returned the smile. "Alina. And you've already met Zoe." Zoe offered him a toothy grin and waved with her whole arm. "She's very brave," Elijah said. "She's very honest," Alina corrected, glancing down at her daughter with a complicated look, pride, maybe, and something else that hinted at fatigue. "I can see that," Elijah replied. "Most people would have walked away." Alina tilted her head, studying him more closely now. "Most people wouldn't have waited outside to say thank you." Elijah chuckled. "Fair enough." There was a beat of silence between them, not awkward but thoughtful. The mall's parking lot shimmered under the afternoon sun behind them. Somewhere nearby, a toddler was screaming. But here, in this strange pocket of connection, Elijah felt oddly grounded. "Can I at least reimburse you?" he asked gently. "Or replace the card balance?" "No need," Alina said quickly. "It wasn't about the money." Zoe tugged on her mother's hand. "We're going to get ice cream now." Elijah smiled at that. "Mind if I join you?" "My treat this time, if your card will let me," he added, with a mock-serious glance at Zoe. Zoe burst into laughter. "Okay." Alina hesitated. She didn't know who this man really was, not yet. He seemed kind, well-mannered, a little too poised for someone who had a card declined. But there was something genuine in his tone, something unforced in his presence. She finally nodded. "All right, but only if you let her pick your flavor." "I accept the risk," Elijah said, falling into step beside them. As they walked toward the food court, Zoe began chattering about all the flavors she loved: mango, cotton candy, chocolate swirl. Elijah listened, smiling, occasionally throwing a glance at Alina, who remained quiet but not distant. It was strange. He'd entered the mall that day expecting nothing but a routine grocery run. Instead, he found himself walking beside two strangers who had shown him a level of kindness that money could never buy. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like Elijah Carter, the billionaire. He just felt like a man who'd been seen. And that, he realized, was worth more than everything in his bank account. The ice cream parlor in the food court was modest, tucked between a pretzel stand and a juice bar, its menu written in swirling pastel chalk on a blackboard behind the counter. Zoe darted ahead with the energy only children possess, her small sneakers squeaking against the polished tile floor as she pressed her hands to the glass display of flavors. "Mango," she declared proudly, turning to Elijah. "You have to try mango. It's the best one." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "Bold choice." "She swears by it," Alina said with a quiet laugh as she caught up beside him. "But she also swore strawberry was the best 2 weeks ago." "I admire her loyalty," he said, chuckling softly. He ordered for all three of them, Zoe's beloved mango, Alina's cautious but elegant pistachio, and his own tentative choice, cotton candy per Zoe's insistence. They found a booth near the window, the late afternoon sun casting long, golden shadows across the table. Zoe ate quickly, chattering between bites, humming a tune under her breath. Elijah watched her for a moment, then shifted his gaze to Alina. She stirred her ice cream with the small plastic spoon, quiet but present. There was a calm to her, but it was the kind of calm that came from holding too much together for too long. "You handled that moment at the store with a lot of grace," Elijah said gently. She looked up, surprised. The cashier? He nodded. I've learned not to react too strongly to people like that, she said. They either feel small and want to make others feel the same, or they're just tired of their own story. That's generous. She gave a soft smile. Not really. Just experience. Elijah paused for a moment, then asked, If you don't mind me saying, you seem like you've had your share of hard days. She took a breath, looked out the window as if choosing her words, and then turned back to him. We all carry something, don't we? We do, he agreed, his voice quiet. Some just hide it better. Alina studied him then, not just politely, but truly. She was starting to suspect there was more to this man than the simple clothes and sheepish smile. He had an ease about him, but it felt constructed, like he was used to being careful. Are you always this observant with strangers? She asked, lifting an eyebrow. Only the ones who buy my groceries, he said with a wry smile. That made her laugh. Not a forced one. A real, small laugh that loosened something in her shoulders. Zoe, having finished her cone, climbed onto the bench beside her mother, nestling into her side. Her eyelids drooped a little, full from sugar and comfort. Alina gently brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead, instinctively protective. Do you mind if I ask? Elijah ventured. You mentioned earlier that she has a strong sense of justice. That kind of empathy, it doesn't come from nowhere. Alina looked down at Zoe, her expression softening. She's been through a lot, she said quietly. More than a 5-year-old should have to understand. There was a pause. Elijah didn't speak. He let the silence hold space for her, and when she continued, her voice was steady but filled with weight. Her father and I are divorcing, she said. He's a powerful man. Successful. Smart. But also cold. Controlling. The marriage ended long before the papers were filed. I'm sorry, Elijah said genuinely. Don't be. It was overdue. But the process has been complicated. She glanced down. He doesn't want to let go of what he thinks he owns. Which apparently included us. Elijah clenched his jaw slightly but said nothing. I left the big house, she continued. Took Zoe with me. I didn't want her growing up thinking love looked like silence and money. That's not an easy decision. No, she said, meeting his eyes. But the right one rarely is. Zoe stirred, muttering something about cartoons in her sleep. Alina brushed her fingers across her daughter's cheek, and Elijah found himself watching the gesture with a quiet kind of awe. There was a strength to this woman that went beyond resilience. It was tenderness forged in fire. I hope this doesn't sound strange, Elijah said after a moment. But you and Zoe, you remind me of something I forgot existed. Alina tilted her head. What's that? People who do good not because they want to be seen, but because they can't imagine doing otherwise. Alina didn't reply right away. Then she said, I think most people are good, but not everyone remembers how to act like it. Their eyes held for a moment longer, and something unspoken passed between them again, something delicate but real. The sun was beginning to dip, casting an orange hue over the world outside. Elijah glanced at the time, but didn't rush. Would it be all right, he asked carefully, if I saw you both again? Maybe take you out for dinner sometime, someplace with fewer broken card machines. Alina smiled. It was cautious, but not closed. We'll see, she said. Zoe's the one you have to win over. Zoe murmured in her sleep. Mango forever. Elijah grinned. I think I'm already halfway there. Elijah stepped into his apartment as the evening city lights painted the floor in shades of gold and gray. He set the grocery bag down on the marble countertop, still thinking about Zoe's tiny voice and her mother's steady eyes. Something had shifted in him, yes, but a gnawing question lingered at the edge of all that warmth. Why had his card declined? It wasn't possible. That account was managed by a personal wealth firm. It had automatic alerts, monthly audits, layers of security. He pulled the slim black card from his wallet and stared at it under the kitchen light. Something felt off. He sat at his desk, opened his secure financial dashboard, and typed in the card number. Invalid. His brow furrowed. He checked the number again. Still invalid. He cross-referenced it with his known account. This card didn't match. He pulled up security logs. No recent replacements, no reports of fraud, no freezes. Everything was normal, except the card in his hand. With growing suspicion, Elijah accessed his home surveillance backup from the previous months. One folder caught his eye, a flagged recording from a night months ago. He tapped it open. It was from his living room. Melissa, his then-girlfriend, was visible on the screen. Laughing, wine glass in hand, casually sifting through his wallet while he was in the shower. Her fingers slid over his cards until she slipped one out and swapped it with another identical-looking one from her purse. Elijah's jaw tightened. He hit pause, frozen. She'd swapped his card as a prank, or worse, a trap, during a time he'd still trusted her. Then she'd vanished from his life after he'd discovered her real motives in a string of text messages to a friend, ones she'd never intended him to see. It's not love. It's strategy. Get the money, then bounce. He had left her. No drama. Just silence and a locked door. In his heartbreak, he hadn't realized she never returned the real card. He leaned back in his chair, mind racing. Not with anger, but with a sense of how cruelly poetic it all was. A card meant to symbolize endless access had been used to humiliate him. And yet, had it not happened, had that exact card failed in that exact moment, he would never have met Zoe. Or Alina. Or begun this strange, beautiful detour from his carefully constructed life. He could feel the bitterness rising, but he didn't let it take root. Not this time. Instead, he picked up the phone, called his finance team, and calmly requested a new card, new account number, and a full audit. No questions. Just start fresh. And when he ended the call, he tossed the fake card into the trash and walked to the window. The city stretched out beneath him, vast and glittering. Let her have the game. He had something real now. Dinner the following week was modest, intentional. Not in a Michelin-starred rooftop restaurant or behind the velvet rope of an exclusive club. Elijah chose a quiet Mediterranean bistro tucked into a side street lined with ivy-covered brick walls. It was the kind of place you had to stumble upon or be brought to by someone who knew the city by heart. No paparazzi. No luxury. Just a warm light, wooden tables, and the smell of garlic, lemon, and good olive oil in the air. He arrived early, uncharacteristically nervous. He'd faced hostile boardrooms, government officials, merger deals worth more than entire economies. But none of that required him to be vulnerable. Here, sitting in a booth with a single flickering candle, Elijah wasn't the billionaire anymore. He was just a man hoping he hadn't imagined the connection they shared in that mall. Hoping she felt it, too. When Alina entered with Zoe, it wasn't in slow motion, but it may as well have been. She wore a simple navy dress, a leather bag slung over her shoulder, hair falling in soft waves now. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She didn't have to. Zoe, walking beside her in a floral skirt and sparkly sneakers, waved excitedly when she spotted him. "Elijah," she called, running ahead and launching herself into the booth beside him. He grinned. "Well, hello, Miss Mango. I'm honored. You better get mango gelato later," she warned with mock seriousness. "I wouldn't dare disappoint you." Alina smiled as she slid into the seat across from him. "You bribed her with sugar, didn't you?" "It's a highly effective currency," he replied. Dinner unfolded in a way that surprised them both. Easy, natural, almost like old friends reconnecting. Zoe alternated between coloring the children's menu with a green crayon and asking Elijah rapid-fire questions. "What's your favorite animal? Do you like clouds? Can you do a cartwheel? I like foxes. I love clouds. And no, I cannot cartwheel, but I'm very good at pretending." Alina watched the exchange quietly, something unreadable in her expression. She wasn't used to men like this, kind, attentive, and completely unconcerned with impressing her or dominating the conversation. Her ex-husband had never once asked Zoe what her favorite flavor of anything was. He'd thought fatherhood could be scheduled. When Zoe excused herself to the restroom, with a server escorting her, Alina leaned back in her chair and looked at Elijah across the table. "You're not what I expected." He tilted his head. What did you expect? I'm still figuring that out. A pause stretched between them, comfortable but thick with potential. Elijah set his utensils down. Can I tell you something? Off the record, as a regular person? Alina raised an eyebrow, intrigued. This isn't a podcast, but sure. I've spent a lot of years in rooms full of very rich, very important people. Rooms where no one's listening unless they think it benefits them. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to talk to someone without wondering what they wanted. Her face softened. Then I met you. And Zoe. And the kindness you gave me in that moment, without knowing anything about me, without wanting anything in return, it stayed with me. Alina looked down, quiet for a beat. It wasn't that big of a deal. It was to me, he said simply. I don't want to just repay you with dinners and gifts. I want to be someone who shows up for you both. If you'll let me. She studied him, unsure. Her heart had been pulled too many ways over the past year. Torn apart by betrayal, patched together by necessity. She had built walls not out of spite, but survival. And yet, here was this man, not breaking them down but waiting patiently at the gate. I appreciate that, she said, her voice low. But we're not looking for a savior, Elijah. I know, he replied, nodding. I'm not offering to save you. I'm offering to stand beside you. That silenced her more than any romantic line ever could. When Zoe returned, climbing back into the booth with sticky hands and a fresh drawing of a very wobbly fox, the moment softened again. Elijah complimented her masterpiece, and Alina smiled to herself, watching them with a quiet ache in her chest. Not because she was falling for him, but because for the first time in years, she felt safe in the presence of a man. As they walked out into the cool evening air, Elijah offered to call them a car, but Alina shook her head. We're a walking kind of family, she said. Then I'll walk with you, he said without hesitation. They strolled under streetlights, Zoe skipping ahead, chasing shadows. Elijah and Alina walked side by side, not touching, not speaking much, but feeling the weight of what had been exchanged. Not just stories or gratitude, but something quietly sacred. Something beginning. And though Elijah didn't say it out loud, he already knew. This was no longer about repaying a kindness. It was about honoring a connection. The sky was turning pink behind the tall windows of the cafe where they often met. Neutral ground between Elijah's guarded world and Alina's rebuilding one. It was quiet now, the hum of city life just a low thrum in the background. Zoe was with a sitter for the afternoon. They had time. Alina stirred her tea absent-mindedly, her eyes tracing the rim of the mug. Elijah sat across from her, hands folded, strangely quiet. There was something heavier in his expression than usual. Not sadness, not fear, just a readiness. She noticed. You've been somewhere else all day, she said gently. He nodded once, exhaling. There's something I need to tell you. She stilled, the way people do when their instincts tell them this moment might change things. I haven't lied, he began. But I haven't told you everything either. Alina said nothing. He looked at her, fully, openly, for the first time without shielding parts of himself. My name is Elijah Carter, he said, not with pride but clarity. I'm the CEO of Carter Innovations. It's a tech company, global. Maybe you've heard of it. Alina blinked, confused. Carter Innovations. That's you. He nodded. Her lips parted slightly. Your company developed the entire infrastructure for smart homes worldwide. You were in Forbes. I was, he said, wincing slightly. I'm in a lot of things I don't read anymore. She leaned back slowly, processing. You're worth billions. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. And then she asked softly, why didn't you tell me? Elijah looked down at his hands. Because I didn't want to be seen as that. I've spent years being treated like a walking dollar sign. Every interaction was strategic. Every relationship a negotiation. But you saw a man who needed help. Not a brand. Not a resume. Alina held his gaze. And you let me believe you were just a quiet guy who shops alone. I am a quiet guy who shops alone, he said gently. But yes, I should have told you sooner. I didn't want to hide. I just wanted something real before the world turned it into something else. She was quiet for a long time. Then, did Zoe know? He laughed, shaking his head. No, but I think she assumes I own the ice cream shop. A smile tugged at Alina's lips despite herself. That would track. Elijah leaned forward slightly. I'm still me. I still want to be here. I still want to help, if you'll let me. She studied him. Finally, she said, I don't care what your bank account says. He blinked. I care that you sit on the floor with my daughter and play with her. I care that you listen, that you respect me, even when I don't know what I'm doing. A pause. Then, but I am going to Google the hell out of you later. He grinned, relieved. That's fair. And just like that, the weight in the room shifted, not gone, but transformed. Not a secret between them anymore, but a bridge. Not wealth. Trust. Weeks passed, each one folding into the next with the quiet rhythm of change. Not fast, but sure, like dawn slowly overtaking the dark. What began as small gestures, ice cream after dinner, walks in the park, the occasional shared lunch, evolved into something more meaningful. Elijah started carving out space in his calendar for them, not because he had to, but because he found himself craving their presence in a way that startled him. The boardroom still called. The business still hummed in the background like a machine that never stopped. But for the first time, Elijah didn't feel enslaved to it. He was building something slower now. Something real. Alina noticed the difference, too. She had never intended to let him in. After all, her world was fragile, held together by court dates, custody evaluations, and nights where she woke up staring at the ceiling, wondering if she'd made the right decisions for Zoe. And yet, Elijah didn't push. He didn't offer solutions wrapped in dollar signs. He showed up with calm and presence, without agenda. It was one afternoon, over tea on the small balcony of the townhouse she rented, that everything began to shift. Elijah sat across from her, holding a chipped ceramic mug she'd bought at a thrift store. Zoe was at school, and the house was unusually quiet. I've been thinking, he said. Alina looked up, wary but open. I'd like to help, he continued. With the legal stuff. Your divorce. Custody. The assets he's trying to hold over you. Elijah, she interrupted gently. No, hear me out, he said, leaning forward, eyes steady. This isn't a rescue mission. I know you're capable. I know you've been handling it. But your ex-husband has resources. He's using them to drag this out, to drain you, to keep you on edge. And I can give you a team who plays at his level. Lawyers who won't let him intimidate you into silence. Alina exhaled slowly. She stared at the steam rising from her cup, fingers tightening around it. I don't want to owe you anything, she said quietly. You won't, he replied without flinching. I'm not asking for anything. Not your trust. Not your affection. Not even your time. Just let me help because I can, and because I believe you and Zoe deserve peace. There was something in his voice that made her believe him. Not pity. Not pride. Just genuine conviction, clean and rare. She nodded slowly. All right. The very next day, Elijah assembled a legal team, quiet, professional, experienced in high-profile divorce cases and wealth protection. The lawyers didn't show up in flashy suits or with condescending attitudes. They listened. They strategized. They fought not with theatrics, but with precision. In a matter of weeks, things that had dragged on for months began to move. The court acknowledged Alina's rights, finally, formally. Custody was awarded fully to her. The financial settlement came through fair and firm. Her ex-husband, for all his attempts to maintain control, was finally out of her daily life. And when the final documents were signed, Elijah didn't gloat. He didn't even attend the hearing. He waited outside in the car, engine humming, fingers tapping lightly on the steering wheel. When Alina walked out, envelope in hand, she didn't say anything right away. She simply got in beside him, closed the door, and looked straight ahead. Then quietly she said, It's over. Elijah nodded. You're free. A pause. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap, and without thinking, she placed one on his. I'm tired, she whispered. I know, he said, squeezing her fingers gently. You don't have to be strong right now. She turned to him, And for the first time since he'd met her, she cried. Not with sobs, but in silent, steady tears that carved through months of tension. Elijah didn't offer words. He didn't try to fix it. He just held her hand and let her feel what she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Later that evening, Zoe danced around their small kitchen, unaware of the finality of what had happened, but sensing the shift in the air. "Mommy's smiling again," she sang, spinning in circles. Alina laughed softly. It was lighter now, real laughter, not the careful kind she used to shield her daughter from worry. And when Elijah joined them for dinner, he found himself at the table with a family that didn't know yet they were becoming his. Over time, the boundaries between their lives blurred, not in haste, but in quiet, deliberate ways. Elijah began spending more evenings with them. He read Zoe bedtime stories. He helped with dishes. He fixed the leaky faucet without calling anyone. And Alina, once guarded and fiercely independent, found herself leaning against his shoulder after long days, not out of weakness, but from trust. She saw the way he looked at Zoe, not with tolerance, but with genuine affection. Like she mattered. Like her presence brought joy. And Zoe? She began introducing him to people as my friend Elijah, but sometimes she whispered to her dolls, "He's kind of like a dad, too." Elijah heard once, by accident, and something in him cracked open. Not from sorrow, but from healing. The garden bloomed late that summer. It wasn't much, a square patch behind the townhouse, surrounded by a wooden fence and half-shaded by a crooked maple tree. But Zoe had insisted they plant something. "Flowers make places happier," she declared one Saturday, cheeks flushed with determination. So Elijah had knelt in the dirt beside her, trading his usual tailored shirts for rolled-up sleeves and muddy knees. Alina had watched from the steps, sipping iced tea, smiling at the two of them. They planted lavender and marigolds, scattered some seeds Zoe couldn't pronounce, and left space for tomatoes they might never grow. Now, weeks later, everything was alive. The petals were bright, full of color and scent. Bees hummed softly. Zoe had even made a tiny sign that read Zoe's Hope Garden, painted in wobbly pink letters and nailed into the soil. Elijah stood out there one evening, watering the plants while Zoe chased butterflies barefoot in the grass. Alina leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, her eyes following him as he bent to untangle a vine from the fence. The light caught in his hair, turning the edges gold. There was peace in his movements, a stillness she hadn't seen in him before. "Hey," she called gently. He turned, squinting at her in the fading light. "Hey, come in. Dinner's almost ready." He smiled, shook water off his hands, and followed her inside. They ate together, nothing fancy. Just grilled chicken, roasted potatoes, and a salad Zoe had helped toss, which mostly meant she'd eaten the croutons before they reached the bowl. There was laughter. No tension. No past looming overhead. Just a table, 3 people, and the warmth of something deeply whole. After dinner, Alina put Zoe to bed. Elijah stayed behind, clearing plates, wiping the counters, humming under his breath. By the time Alina returned, he was sitting on the couch, a book open in his lap but unread. She sat beside him, folding her legs underneath her. For a long time they said nothing. Then softly she spoke. "She asked me today if she could call you Dad." Elijah's breath caught. He closed the book and turned to face her. "I told her not yet," Alina continued, "because I didn't want to confuse her. Or you. I didn't know if that was too much." Elijah shook his head slowly. "It's not too much." Alina's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "She loves you." His throat tightened. "I love her," he said. "And I love you." Alina didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She just looked at him. Really looked, and finally said what she hadn't let herself say until now. "I love you too." No thunder. No dramatic music. Just silence and the kind of understanding that doesn't need embellishment. He reached for her hand, and she let him hold it. It had been months since that day at the mall. Months since a little girl offered him help without knowing who he was, or what he had. Back then, he had thought he was the one being rescued. A billionaire brought low, saved by the simple kindness of a child. But now, sitting on a worn couch beside a woman who never asked for anything but gave everything anyway, he understood the truth. They had saved each other. Not with wealth, not with pity, but with the quiet power of presence, of choosing one another day after day. Eventually, Zoe came padding down the hallway, rubbing her eyes, a stuffed elephant under one arm. Elijah. He turned. Yeah, sweet pea? She climbed into his lap without hesitation. Can we be a real family now? She mumbled sleepily. Alina reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind Zoe's ear. Yes, Elijah said, kissing the top of her head. We already are. That night, under a soft summer breeze and a sky full of stars, a family that had never been planned, but had been deeply hoped for, became real. Not by name, not by blood, but by love. And that was more than enough. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.